Welcome to Green Building Matters, the original and most popular podcast focused on the green building movement. Your host is Charlie Cicchetti, one of the most credentialed experts in the green building industry and one of the few to be honored as a LEED Fellow. Each week, Charlie welcomes a green building professional from around the globe to share their war stories, career advice, and unique insight into how sustainability is shaping the built environment. So settle in, grab a fresh cup of coffee, and get ready to find out why green building matters.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the next episode of the Green Building Matters podcast. Once a week, I get to interview a green building professional somewhere in the world. Sometimes I even get to interview some LEED fellows, and that's what we've got here. We've got Mercedes Oviedo with us. She's in the New York City area. Can't wait to learn more about her background, coming over from Spain, her sustainability career, and what it meant to her to become a LEED fellow last year. So, Mercedes, thanks for joining us today. How are you doing today?
Very good. Thank you. Excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, I know we've been running into each other in our green building circles, and it's all about community. And I just can't wait to let our listeners learn more about you and your background. So take us back. Where'd you grow up and where'd you go to school?
Sure, no problem. I've been very fortunate, and I've had the great opportunity to study in multiple countries around the world, including the US, Guatemala, Chile, and Spain. I have an academic background in architecture, but I actually started off in construction. I thought that was the field for me. I was an intern for a contractor for about 6 months, but a few months in, I figured, okay, this is interesting. I've learned a lot because, there's nothing better than the actual doing to learn, right? But it wasn't where I saw my future. So I was looking into other possibilities and I went into design. And it is really interesting. Obviously, with the background in architecture, it is what I thought I was going to do for the rest of my life. But I wasn't fulfilled by that. So I was taking some extra curriculum courses and people kept talking about LEED and LEED here and LEED there. I wasn't really sure what they were talking about. I was also a little shy to ask because everyone seemed to know except me. So it was, I was really young. I just didn't want to ask. But I went home, I did some research, and I discovered the green building certification system called LEED. And, everything panned out pretty well from there. I, again, was just dipping my toes into it. I wasn't sure what I was going to do next, but, just studying, learning more. And I had taken a few courses on sustainability, specifically passive architecture in school. So I was familiar with the terminology. I just didn't know it was what I was going to do in the future. But as I learned more, I basically fell in love with it, with sustainability in general. I found it was the combination of the two worlds I was most passionate about. One, architect, right? And then architecture. And then the other one, which I consider myself an environmentalist. So I thought, this is perfect. This is just exactly what I was looking for. I basically took a leap of faith, right? I was like, I think this is the future. I'm going to go for it. I'm going to shoot for the stars and see what happens. I wasn't sure how it was going to look. I wasn't sure how long it was going to last, but look, here I am 15 years later and I love it. And I hope to have so many more years on it. I'm very excited to be here.
And you take that leap and look at it. It is the future. It's a big part of the future. So as I understand it, you were starting to do some LEED project management work at a firm, and then you even went back and got a master's. And so tell us about that, environmental engineering, bioclimatic architecture. So what made you want to go study even more, even though you were already working on some projects?
Right. Yeah. So because I felt I started off with the LEED certification, right? I felt I needed to understand what made this certification what it was, right? So it was just basically looking at it from the beginning. Why are these criteria? Why does this matter? Why is the intent? What is the purpose of these prerequisites, requirements, et cetera, et cetera? So I had so many open questions, right? And I figured I need to take a step back here and understand sustainability more than what I think I understand, right? I knew it from a rating system point of view, but I didn't know it from the, development point of view, from more basic concepts, if you want to look at it that way. And so, like I said, since I have a background in architecture, I thought, learning more because my first master's degree was in passive architecture. And actually my first design project was a single family house where without really knowing that I was going to be a sustainability consultant in the future, without really knowing, I included passive architectural strategies in it, cross ventilation, different ceiling heights, triple pane windows, and other strategies like that, orientations, sun exposure, and all of that. So it was very interesting for me to take a step back from the certification world. And from there, I graduated. I was studying my master's degree, and I wanted to understand everything from a technical point of view, right? So I understood passive design strategies, and I wanted to understand the technical side of it. And then I moved to environmental engineer, where I thought I was going to get my PhD, but that didn't work out, which was fine. It was still an interesting part of my life, but yeah, that works.
I love that. And I mean, I applaud you for those. You really knew if you were going to go back for a master's, like, let's get specific on some really important parts of what else makes, an environmental kind of successful career. And I just love that. So mentors, I love to ask my guests, Mercedes, have you had any mentors? Some are people we read about, follow their work, and some we get to meet with in person and they open a door for us. But have you had any mentors along the way?
Well, yes, for sure. I've had mentors along the way. I try to learn from everyone. I think we all, walk our own path, and our life molds us in different ways, and it gives us the opportunity to be different. And I try my best to learn from every single person I work with, interact with, or whoever I have the opportunity to talk to for a few minutes. It could be that person can be very inspirational. I have had a few mentors throughout my career, mainly people that push the bar, friends and colleagues that, work together and work for a bigger goal. I think they are the people that have encouraged me to take a challenge and continue with this effort and, endeavor in new ideas.
Thank you for that. All right, let's talk more about early in that career. So I understand you maybe had moved from South America and relocated. So what's happening in that early part of the career, and what kind of projects were you working on?
When I started off, you know what? It's actually really funny because my first job, aside from that single family house that I did as a designer, not as a sustainability consultant, but when I started working in a sustainability department, my first job as an intern was to translate the LEED NC reference guide. And that was challenging because it's its own little world, you had to really understand it in order to translate it from one language to the other. So it sounds simple. It's doable, obviously, but you had to read it a couple of times. All right, this is what they want. So let me translate this to another language now. I started off with something like that. And then obviously I had exposure to new projects. My first job in the sustainability consulting world was in Chile. And I did have the opportunity to work on, important projects that were reaching, during that time, it was LEED version 3 was the new thing, right? And they were going for LEED goals. So they were aiming high and they were achieving those levels, which was amazing.
And I just love this global view of LEED you've had. I mean, my career has been U.S. LEED and just now maybe going overseas. I love how you kind of were overseas and took it here. And we'll talk in a minute about what you're doing in and around New York and beyond. So let's talk about some of your proudest accomplishments, though. As you look back, what stands out? What are some of your proudest accomplishments?
Well, in terms of projects, I think the airport projects I'm working on a couple of airport projects, and they have been very rewarding. They've been challenging. As you know, the LEED rating system was developed for office space, right? And it evolved to this global application, which, I find it amazing. And it's a team effort, right? I think I'm very proud of those projects. I have signed all sorts of NDAs, so I can't go into into the weeds of it, but I'm really proud of those. But I think the one thing that I am proudest would be education and mentoring. I love the idea that there is a new generation behind me. You know, there's a few more generations actually now behind me. And I just love that. I spent as much time. Well, I don't spend as much time as I would want to because we are, drowning in projects, which is a good thing. I'm not complaining. But yeah, I would love to continue with that effort. It's just, so rewarding.
Absolutely. Well, we got to talk about credentials, LEED fellow, and even volunteering, and then we'll get to present day. But just, I understand you've been involved with the LEED International Roundtable. You've got lots of LEED and WELL credentials, and congratulations on your LEED fellow. Could you speak to that a little bit, Mercedes, where you like to volunteer and what credentials have meant to you in this career?
Thank you. So, you know what? I never thought of myself as a person that will just gather credentials. I never thought that I would have as many credentials as I currently hold. It panned out that way, that I started off with LEED once I was pretty well, involved in LEED projects and I knew the rating systems back and forth. It wasn't necessarily a new thing, but it had a lot of noise, right? And I figured, you know what? Yes, this is an extension of sustainability. It's part of a sustainability. It's an extension of LEED. It's where the IAQ category is picking up. This is where we have to go. So I started studying for my WELL exam. That turned into also my FitWell credential, and use these credentials as an opportunity to continue educating myself, right? They are an indicator of what is important, how we have to do it, a lot of research, a lot of experts behind it, trying to develop some tool that will allow us to reach our sustainability goals. And my latest credentials have been the True Advisor, which unfortunately I haven't had the opportunity to put in practice yet, but, looking forward to some projects in the future. And Envision is the thing. And nowadays I've been lucky enough to be involved in a couple of projects, which is very exciting. But yeah, I never thought I was going to work in infrastructure, to be honest. But here I am. I'm loving it and I am all in. And the last one would be my LEED fellow, I was incredibly excited. I was very nervous when, there's a lot of paperwork involved with the LEED fellow credential. There's a lot of backtracking, going through emails, reports, all sorts of things. But it was very rewarding. I was very excited when I got that email from Peter Templeton, that congratulating me for that credential.
A huge deal. I mean, you have to have been a LEED AP for 10 years. You have to have had impact on this movement, and you've done that. So congratulations, and just to the LEED Fellow Club. I know there's many that aspire to that. So it's definitely validation. You're doing some really cool stuff. And I can tell you got a lot more you want to do and make a difference. So tell us about present day. Tell us about E4. Tell us about your team and kind of a day in the life of Mercedes today.
Sure. So E4 is a green building consulting company. It's been around for over 20 or 25 years. The main services that we offer are strategic sustainability services, green project management. Our main line would be the LEED certification, but we also do other certifications, right? Like I said, FitWell, Envision, WELL, etc. We are WBE, which is very exciting. There's a lot of opportunities now for WBEs. There's a lot of incentives out there encouraging projects to hire WBEs. So that's also pretty amazing how we've had a high demand lately. And we have a team of sustainability analysts I work with. We have other project managers in the office and our principal, Pamela Lippy, who you met. And she's also a LEED fellow. And, we work on projects all the time, which is really exciting. Like I said, the airport projects are star projects right now. They keep us busy, which is a great thing.
Yeah. And so, tell us some more about your role at E4.
Sure. So at E4, I'm currently an associate principal and sustainability project manager. I manage multiple projects from the beginning to its final certification or whatever goal they have established. I try to mentor. I train our staff, project teams. I provide strategic ideas to clients.
Yeah, going back to that international roundtable, I'm just so fascinated that you had all this even international LEED experience, and now you've applied it to a lot of projects. You've been in New York for about 10 years now. So, but that LEED International Roundtable, Mercedes, you've kept that up. So what is that? Give us a quick snapshot. What happens there?
Sure. So I actually started working with Manuel Macias at GBC España during that period of time. This was when I was studying for my first master's degree. And like I said before, I wanted to understand the rating system from behind the scenes, right? Not from the actual reference guide that we had. So I volunteered at GBC España for a while, and they were kicking off the LEED International Roundtable Committee. So he thought it was a great opportunity for me to be involved. And I loved it because it gave me the opportunity to see the rating system from behind the scenes, right? Everything that you need to evaluate, everything that you need to consider. And in that point, we were looking into LEED version 4. Well, they were looking into LEED version 4 globalization, right? They wanted to make sure that LEED was ready for, LEED was developed for the US, but they wanted to make it global. So we were looking at international standards, specifically because we were in Spain, we were looking at European standards. But being part of the LEED International Roundtable Committee gave me a huge opportunity and to see the LEED rating system from another lens. And the one thing I love the most, I feel, and I think I helped influence what we now know as LEED version 4.
Yeah, and so tell us about Envision. That's one I think a lot of our listeners probably not quite as familiar with. So I know you want to get back to the waste audits and zero waste and true, and that'll come with time. That's a little harder to do in New York, but hey, we can do it. But tell us about Envision.
Right. So Envision is a green infrastructure certification. The one thing that caught my attention while I was studying for my Envision credential is how they have a huge focus on public outreach, right? How stakeholder involvement, how the community is incredibly important compared to many other certifications, right? They have the basic sustainability requirements as we see them in LEED and BREEAM and any other green building certification, right? We see recycled content, construction waste, all of that same concept. But the one thing that caught my attention was that community, stakeholder, and involvement, the impact that one infrastructure project will have in that community. And I remember one of the examples they give you at the very beginning is you have a town, you want to build this road, but you're going to split this town. You most likely are going to split this town in two. So what does that mean, right? Are you creating two different groups? How will you keep them together as one community? I found it very interesting. It's complicated. It's not as easy as it may sound. It is complicated, but you see it from another point of view. You definitely understand that infrastructure is a whole other animal compared to the building field.
Yeah, no, infrastructure. So everybody check it out. Check out Envision, and it fits on these large scale projects, which have tremendous impact, right? So one thing to save energy in our operating carbon, I'm sure it gets into even more embodied carbon, and it's just fascinating. So let's talk about the future, though. I love to ask a green building expert like you, what are you excited about in the future of this movement? What's kind of coming at us? What's around the corner that you're kind of reading up on?
Right. So, I did take a leap of faith in sustainability, but I'm not that great at predicting the future. I hear a lot about embodied carbon. I think everyone is finding solutions to address embodied carbon, to calculate embodied carbon, to see to see the impact of this in sustainability in general. I think we're going to see this rolling out for a while, maybe new methodologies, technologies, tools, whatever it is. I also think there's going to be a bigger push in the wellness world. I'm actually surprised. I I felt that right after COVID, there was a lot of noise around wellness, and it's been declining a little bit, but I still think that we're going to push for it. It's very important. This new generation has brought it to our attention. Emotional stability is very important. So we have to pay attention to how everyone's feeling within the work environment, right? Are we designing these spaces in a way that people are excited to come, are they feel healthy, right? They're not only healthy, but they feel healthy. So I think wellness will also be something that we'll see evolving and integrated more in the future.
Do you find some of your clients want to do both LEED and well or fit well, or not necessarily? Some might just want a wellness. Do you think it might come back where we get that one and we already do green best practices? I don't know. What's your theory there?
Wow, that's difficult. So we have a lot of clients asking for LEED and well. It's very rare that we get a client asking for a well certification only. Fitwell has also, when they single out wellness certifications, Fitwell might be a standalone certification. But whenever people talk about well, they talk about it along with LEED.
Yeah, it's, and I know we know a lot of the folks at the U.S. Green Building Council at International Well Building Institute there in New York where you're at, and they're really trying to make those two programs work smoothly together, even LEED online, well online. So I would just double down and say, to our listeners, I think it's very important post-pandemic we get back to healthy building best practices, not just green cleaning, not just better air filters, but we really get back to biophilia and getting natural light in, just all kinds of the other kind of proactive, healthy building things. So I think if we can keep going with LEED, we've got LEED version 5 coming up, and let's not forget about healthy buildings. Maybe you want a certification. We still think there's going to be a lot of success with well and fit well. Cool. I love talking to you about this in the future. Let's talk about you a little more. So Mercedes, what would you say is your specialty or gift?
Wow. My specialty or gift? I was not prepared for this one, I think.
What would others say about you? Maybe some of your colleagues you've worked with for almost 10 years there at E4. What would they say is your specialty or gift?
Patience, probably.
Yeah, seriously. Not a lot of people have that. So where do you think you got patience from?
Oh, I think life in general. I consider myself a very patient person. I also do a lot of research. I think that's pretty much proven throughout all my career, right? I hear something. If I don't know it, I will research. If I don't understand it, I will ask. And it is the one thing I try to encourage everyone, right? Don't just stand there and wait until the answers fall into your lap. You have to go out there. You have to look for them. You have to ask us, do the research, do your homework, and you'll get the answer that you're looking for.
Patience, you heard it. Sometimes it's one of my favorite fables is the tortoise and the hare. Some might say, Mercedes, I like instant gratification, but if they get to know me, I'm more about long game and just maybe that longer term patience. I love that. Well, let's talk about good habits, routines, rituals, or anything you do that helps you stay on point.
I try to, now with post-pandemic, we don't go to the office that often. We have this hybrid situation going on, but at least during my commute, I always try to read a book. I feel that, we're a little bit overwhelmed with technology sometimes. I do want to throw my phone out the window from time to time. I don't do it, but I want to. So during that, for 35 minutes, 40 minutes that I commute to work, I try to open a book, sometimes related to sustainability, sometimes not. It could be fictional, whatever it is, but it helps me disconnect from, that day-to-day thing that absorbs us and, explore something new.
Love that. That's really cool. And that's the work we do, right? Is we have to practice what we preach here, and people spend a lot of time indoors. All right, so let's talk about a bucket list. As you get to know me more, I'm a fan of a bucket list. Not everybody has a bucket list, but if there were one or two things on your bucket list, I don't know, any travel, adventure, maybe you want to write a book. What's on the bucket list?
It's funny that you mentioned the bucket list because someone gifted me a bucket list notebook 2 years ago and it's still empty. I do not have a bucket list.
Well, let's start on it right now. So is there a certain place you either want to go to one day or back to? Let's start there.
Right. So traveling is a thing here at home. My parents have traveled their entire lives and they encouraged me to do that. And I've enjoyed it a lot. So I haven't explored Asia yet. That is on my bucket list for sure. That's something that I would really like to do. And it's funny that you mentioned write a book. I've been playing with that idea for over 10 years. I do question myself, right? Do I have something to tell? But, from time to time, I write things down here or there. Maybe eventually someday it will become a book. But if I don't, I'll continue writing my story and we'll see what happens.
They say that everybody has a book in them. I think with a bucket list, I kind of like it, but you can kind of theme it. Maybe there's something you want to start a collection on or travel or adventure or just a certain experience. But the book, that is a good one. I'm sure you've got something there you could team up and write something pretty cool. I'd like to also ask about books or a TED Talk or a documentary, anything that you think, it doesn't have to be about buildings, but anything you'd recommend to our listeners.
Sure. So I recently read Blue Mind, which is a book about, how important we connect with water, right? How our emotional connection to water, physical connection to water, how important it is and how it impacts our either memories or our day to day. It's funny because I have a friend that I went to school with, and after long hours of working on projects, he used to just get up very abruptly and said, no, I need green. And he literally either went to the backyard or went out for a walk. And, it was like his thing. I didn't really pay attention to it until I started working in the sustainability world, specifically the wellness world. And then I came across books like this one, right? Blue Minds, where they talk about how important it is to be connected to water, how much peace it brings us. And same thing, right, with green nature and all of that. Every time I opened the book, I remembered him saying, I need green. I definitely understand that. Especially, during the pandemic, whoever was stuck in an apartment, like we were all in New York City, the pandemic was hard. We needed to see green. We needed to see, in this case, blue. And I found that book really interesting. Not that we don't know it, but it is interesting to read it. I really enjoyed that book. And right now I am currently reading The Engineer's Wife, which is a book about, I just started it, but I've heard great reviews. It's about the chief engineer of the Brooklyn Bridge, Emily. Yes. Sorry, I missed her last name, but it's basically how her journey throughout, the construction of the Brooklyn Bridge. It started off with her husband and then he was injured. So she had to take over. So I've heard great things about it. I just started it, literally opened the first chapter probably a week ago, but I've heard it's a good book.
Well, great recommendations. All right, we're going to put those books, a link in our podcast show notes. With the blue, you're right. That's why I love in Boston or New York, right? Maybe you go over the East River or the Hudson River, just a little bit of that. But once a year, I get to go to a conference in La Jolla on San Diego, and that just brings me so much happiness there with that connection to the ocean. So I love that. And so my last question is, let's say someone's listening right now. They're really enjoying our podcast today, and maybe they're in a different career and they're changing and they're just now going to get into green buildings, or maybe they're a young professional and they're really just now jumping in. We want them to pass a LEED Green Associate exam. We want them to go these steps to make a career here. But any words of encouragement for someone jumping in right now as we come to a close?
Go for it. I think there is a huge opportunity here. There is a whole array of paths that can be chosen from. This is a present. This is definitely the future, right? And we'll see new tools and technologies come up, and it's going to be it is very interesting, and I'm sure it's going to be even more interesting in the future. I do, as part of E4, as part of my role at E4 is training interns, and I do encourage all of them to continue on this path. Most of the time they're exploring, right? They don't really know where they see themselves in the future. And I do try to encourage them to continue on this path. It is the future. So they'll love it. I know they'll love it.
Well, come on in to this movement. It's been good to Mercedes. It's been good to me. Make sure you connect with Mercedes on LinkedIn. If you're ever in the New York area, hey, reach out, maybe grab some coffee. And I just want to say thanks for telling us your story, how you got into and have really thrived in this green building movement. And I hope to see you soon, Mercedes. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Green Building Matters podcast. At gbes.com, our mission is to advance the green building movement through best-in-class education and encouragement. Remember, you can go to gbes.com/podcast for any notes and links that we mentioned in today's episode. And you can actually see the other episodes that have already been recorded with our amazing guests. Please tell your friends about this podcast. Tell your colleagues. And if you really enjoyed it, leave a positive review on iTunes. Thank you so much, and we'll see you on next week's episode.